The bitter Dakota winter of 1872 showed no mercy to anyone, least of all to Eleanor Blackwood. Abandoned in a ransacked homestead, her body broken and her spirit nearly crushed, she prepared to join her murdered husband in death's cold embrace. But fate had other plans. As the blizzard's howl threatened to become her funeral dirge, an unexpected savior emerged from the swirling snow. Red Eagle, war chief of the Hunkpapa Sioux. Their unlikely encounter would challenge everything they both believed about their worlds and forge a bond that defied the violent prejudices of their time. This is the forgotten story of how two souls from warring sides of the American frontier found humanity in each other when all hope seemed lost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Blackwood clutched her husband's pocket watch, the metal cold against her palm, as she stared out across the endless white expanse that surrounded their small homestead. 6 months earlier, Thomas had brought her to this remote corner of the Dakota Territory with promises of fertile land and new beginnings. Now he lay in a frozen grave behind their cabin, and Eleanor was alone. The autumn of 1872 had started with such promise. Their modest wheat harvest had been enough to see them through the winter, and Thomas had even spoken of expanding their small farm come spring. At 32, Eleanor had finally begun to believe that perhaps their gamble of leaving Philadelphia for the frontier might pay off. Thomas had skills as a carpenter that were in demand even this far west, and Eleanor's knowledge of herbal remedies had made her a welcome addition to the scattered community of settlers. But 3 days ago, while Thomas was repairing a neighbor's roof 5 miles away, something had gone terribly wrong at their homestead. Eleanor had been gathering the last hardy herbs from her garden when she heard the approach of horses. She remembered looking up, expecting to see friendly faces from the nearby settlement. Instead, she'd seen 5 men she didn't recognize, with hard eyes and weathered faces that spoke of too many winters spent living by their own brutal code. Not the army, not trappers, just men who took what they wanted. "Well, now, what do we have?" "Here," the leader had called out, swinging down from his horse. "Looks like we found ourselves a little homesteader lady all on her own." What followed was a nightmare of violence. They'd ransacked the cabin, taking their winter stores, Thomas's tools, and the small box where they kept what little money they had. When Eleanor had tried to stop them, the leader had struck her with such force that she'd fallen against the cast-iron stove, feeling something crack inside her chest. "Please," she'd gasped, struggling to breathe through the pain. "Take what you want. Just leave us enough to survive the winter." The leader had laughed then, a sound so empty of mercy that Eleanor knew in that moment she was looking at her own death. "Survive? Lady, you're already dead. This land takes everything eventually. We're just speeding things along." They'd left, her bleeding on the floor of the cabin she and Thomas had built with their own hands, riding off with everything they needed to make it through the coming winter. By some miracle, they hadn't found her wedding ring or Thomas's pocket watch, which she kept sewn into the lining of her dress, small comforts that would mean nothing if she froze or starved to death. For 2 days, Eleanor had drifted in and out of consciousness, her injuries making it impossible to travel for help. She'd managed to drag herself to the water bucket and had rationed the last heel of bread she found kicked under the table. But with the first snowfall of winter beginning to blanket the ground outside, she knew her time was running short. On the 3rd day, Thomas had returned, his face transforming from cheerful anticipation to horror as he took in the state of their home and his wife. He'd gathered her up, promising that everything would be all right, that he would take care of her. He'd ridden through the night to reach the nearest doctor, only to find that the men who had attacked their homestead had set upon the small settlement as well. What happened next was pieced together for Eleanor later by Martha Wilson, the shopkeeper's wife, who had found Thomas's body. The band of outlaws had been cornered by Thomas and some of the other men from the settlement. In the shootout that followed, Thomas had taken a bullet meant for young Bobby Wilson. He died a hero, but that was cold comfort to Eleanor as she faced the Dakota winter alone and injured. Martha and the other women had done what they could, bringing Eleanor back to her cabin with some basic supplies, but the harsh reality was that the entire settlement was struggling after the attack. They had their own families to worry about, and a woman alone on the frontier was simply expected to fend for herself or perish. The nearest cavalry outpost was a 3-day ride away, and with the winter storms rolling in, no one was eager to make the journey to report the attack. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," Martha had said, her eyes avoiding Eleanor's as she prepared to leave. "If it wasn't for the children, Thomas was a good man, too good for this godless country." And so Eleanor found herself alone, watching the snow pile higher against the door of her cabin, knowing that each passing hour brought her closer to the end. Her ribs ached with every breath, and the fever that had started the night before was making it difficult to think clearly. She had managed to light a small fire, but their woodpile was nearly gone, the outlaws having taken most of it in their wagon. As the daylight began to fade on what she was certain would be her last day on Earth, Eleanor heard something that made her blood run cold, hoofbeats approaching through the snow. Had the outlaws returned to finish what they'd started? She clutched Thomas's old hunting rifle, though she doubted she had the strength to lift it, let alone aim. The door rattled, then swung open on its broken hinges. Snow swirled in, followed by a tall figure wrapped in furs. Eleanor raised the rifle with trembling hands. "Stay back," she warned, her voice barely audible. "I'll shoot." The figure paused, then slowly raised his hands, pushing back the hood that covered his face. Eleanor gasped. Standing before her was a Sioux warrior, his dark hair adorned with a single eagle feather, his face painted with red stripes that stood out starkly against his bronze skin. "I mean no harm," he said in perfect, though accented English. "I am Red Eagle of the Hunkpapa Sioux. I saw smoke from your chimney. Strange, so far from others." Eleanor's grip on the rifle faltered, the weapon suddenly too heavy for her weakened arms. "If you've come to kill me, you're too late. This place has already been visited by devils." Red Eagle stepped further into the cabin, his keen eyes taking in the overturned furniture, the broken dishes, the bloodstains on the floor. His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the kind of violence that had occurred here. "Not Sioux work," he said firmly. "White men did this." Eleanor laughed bitterly, then winced at the pain in her ribs. "Yes, white men. My own kind." The rifle slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. "So finish what they started. I don't have the strength to fight anymore." Instead of reaching for a weapon, Red Eagle moved to the fireplace, adding more wood from a small stack Eleanor hadn't been able to reach. The flames leapt higher, casting flickering shadows across the walls of the cabin. "Why would I kill a woman who is already embracing death?" he asked, his back still to her. "That brings no honor." Eleanor stared at him in confusion. Everything she had ever heard about the Sioux painted them as merciless savages who took pleasure in the suffering of settlers. Yet here was one, building up her fire instead of burning her cabin to the ground. "Then why are you here?" she managed to ask. Red Eagle turned to face her, his expression solemn. "I tracked 7 men, white men on painted horses. They attacked a Hunkpapa hunting party 2 days' ride from here, killed 3 of my people, including my sister's son." Eleanor's heart sank. 5 men came here. They took everything, beat me, left me to die. My husband," her voice broke, "my husband tried to stop them at the settlement. They killed him." For a long moment, Red Eagle was silent, studying her with an intensity that made Eleanor want to shrink back against the wall. Then he nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "These men are enemies to both our peoples," he said. "But you will not live to see them punished if you stay here." He moved around the small cabin, gathering what few items remained intact. A blanket, a tin cup, a small sack of cornmeal the outlaws had overlooked. Eleanor watched him in bewilderment. "What are you doing?" "You cannot stay," he said simply. "The winter comes. No food, little wood. You will die." Eleanor closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. "Perhaps that's for the best. There's nothing left for me here." Red Eagle paused in his preparations, fixing her with a stern gaze. "Your spirit has been broken, like a young horse thrown too roughly. But a broken thing can be mended if the will is there." "And if the will isn't there?" Eleanor challenged, a spark of her old fire momentarily returning. "Then I have made a mistake in coming here," he replied, "and you are not the woman I thought you were." Those words, so unexpected and direct, struck Eleanor like a physical blow. What kind of woman did this stranger think she was, and why should she care about his opinion? Yet something in his steady gaze made her straighten her shoulders despite the pain. "I don't even know if I can walk," she admitted. "My ribs, I think they're broken." Red Eagle nodded. "Yes, I can see how you hold yourself, but I have medicines, and my people's winter camp is 3 days' ride from here. It is your choice. Stay and join your husband in death, or come with me and perhaps find a reason to live." Put so starkly, the choice seemed both impossible and obvious. Eleanor thought of Thomas, of how he had always admired her determination, her refusal to accept defeat even when the frontier had tested them beyond measure. Would he want her to surrender now? "Why would you help me?" she asked, needing to understand. "I'm nothing to you." Red Eagle was silent for a moment, his gaze turning to the window where the snow continued to fall in thick white sheets. "My grandfather was a great chief," he finally said. "He taught me that our actions toward those in need define us more than our actions in battle. A warrior who ignores suffering is no warrior at all." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. He turned back to her, his expression softening slightly. "And you are not nothing. You are a woman who has faced evil and still draws breath, that deserves respect." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes for the first time since Thomas had died. She had been holding her grief at bay, knowing that to give in to it would be to surrender, to despair. But this unexpected kindness from a man she had been taught to fear broke something open inside her. "I don't even know if I can trust you," she whispered. Red Eagle nodded, as if her suspicion was both expected and reasonable. "Trust is earned, not given. But tonight, you must choose. Trust me enough to leave, or trust that death will be kind." Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters of the cabin that had been meant to be Eleanor's home for many years to come. She looked around at the shattered remains of the life she and Thomas had tried to build. There was nothing left for her here, but memories and a slow, painful end. "I'll come with you," she said finally, her voice stronger than she expected. "If only because Thomas would never forgive me for giving up without a fight." A ghost of a smile touched Red Eagle's lips. "Good. We leave at first light." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "I must see to my horse and prepare shelter for the night. Rest now. Tomorrow will test your strength." After he left, Eleanor sank back against the wall, her mind reeling from the strange turn her fate had taken. She had expected to die alone in this cabin, another nameless victim of the frontier's harsh realities. Instead, she found herself placing her life in the hands of a Sioux war chief, a man who by all accounts should have been her enemy. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Eleanor closed her eyes, Thomas's pocket watch still clutched tightly in her And she didn't know what awaited her beyond the familiar confines of her broken home, but for the first time since the attack, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that her story wasn't over yet. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks of those who had brought such suffering to this remote corner of the Dakota Territory. By morning, all signs of their passage would be erased, as if nature itself was wiping the slate clean, offering Eleanor Blackwood a chance to begin again in the most unexpected of circumstances. Red Eagle returned an hour later, carrying a bundle of furs and a small leather pouch. Without a word, he set about preparing a tea with dried herbs from the pouch, the pungent aroma filling the small cabin. When he handed the steaming cup to Eleanor, she hesitated only briefly before drinking the bitter liquid. Almost immediately, the worst of her pain began to subside. "What is this?" she asked, surprised by the medicine's effectiveness. "Old knowledge," Red Eagle replied simply, "from a time before your people came to these lands." He then examined her injuries with a healer's practiced eye, his touch clinical and respectful. He bound her ribs with strips of soft buckskin supporting the broken bones without restricting her breathing too severely. His efficiency suggested he had done this many times before, perhaps for warriors injured in battle. As he worked, Eleanor studied his face, noting the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of a man in his late 30s, perhaps close to her own age. Despite his imposing presence, there was something in his manner that gradually eased her initial fear, a steadiness, a lack of hurry or aggression that contradicted everything she'd been told about his people. "You speak English very well," she observed as he finished securing the bandage. Red Eagle's expression revealed nothing. "I spent 2 winters at the Fort Laramie trading post as a young man. I learned your tongue, your ways. Knowledge of an enemy is a weapon more valuable than any bow or rifle." "Am I your enemy?" Eleanor asked quietly. Red Eagle regarded her thoughtfully. "You are a woman who has suffered at the hands of men without honor. That makes you something else entirely." He paused, then added, "Sleep now. The medicine will help. Tomorrow comes early." Eleanor wanted to ask more questions, but the herbal tea was making her eyelids heavy, the pain receding enough to allow sleep to approach. As she drifted off, she heard Red Eagle moving about the cabin, securing what he could against the elements before settling himself near the door, a silent sentinel between her and the dangers of the night. Her last conscious thought was that she had entrusted her life to a man who, by all rights, should have considered her an intruder on his ancestral lands. Yet something told her that with Red Eagle, her broken body might be safer than it had been among her own kind. The dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night to leave a world transformed by snow. Eleanor awoke to find Red Eagle already preparing for their journey, efficiency in every movement. The medicine had worked wonders on her pain, though she knew her injuries were far from healed. "Can you stand?" he asked, offering his arm for support. Eleanor took it, grimacing as she pulled herself upright. Her legs felt weak, her head swimming slightly, but she remained standing. "Yes," she said with determination that surprised even her. "I can stand." Red Eagle nodded, something like approval flickering in his eyes. "Then we go. Now." The journey began in silence. Eleanor perched awkwardly on Red Eagle's painted horse, while he led the animal through drifts of snow that sometimes reached above his knees. He had fashioned a travois from branches taken from the woods near her cabin, loading it with the few salvageable supplies and furs to keep her warm. Each step away from the homestead felt like severing another tie to her former life, yet Eleanor couldn't bring herself to look back. The first day's travel was brutal. Though Red Eagle's medicine continued to dull the worst of her pain, Eleanor's body protested every jolt and sway. By midday, her face had grown pale with exhaustion, a fact that didn't escape her companion's notice. "We stop here," he announced, helping her down beside a frozen creek sheltered by a stand of cottonwoods. "Rest while I make fire." Eleanor wanted to object, to insist she could continue, but the relief of being still was too great. She watched as Red Eagle efficiently cleared snow, gathered wood, and started a small fire with practiced movements. His hands, she noticed, were strong, yet surprisingly dexterous, the hands of someone equally skilled at both creation and destruction. "You said the men who attacked me also killed your people," she ventured as he handed her a small piece of dried meat. "Why would they target both settlers and Sioux?" Red Eagle crouched beside the fire, feeding it carefully. "Men like these see only what can be taken. To them, all others are just obstacles." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "White settlers push into our hunting grounds. My people resist. These make easy excuses for men who desire only blood and plunder." Eleanor chewed the tough meat, slowly considering his words. The newspapers in Philadelphia painted a different picture. They said the Sioux were savages who attacked peaceful settlements without provocation. A shadow passed over Red Eagle's face. "And what tales do they tell of Sand Creek? Of the women and children cut down while holding white flags? Of babies killed while nursing at their mothers' breasts?" He looked away, his jaw tight. "Each side has its stories. Few contain the whole truth." The silence that followed was heavy with centuries of conflict neither of them had created, but both inherited. Finally, Eleanor spoke again, her voice quiet. "I'm sorry about your sister's son." Red Eagle's expression softened slightly. He was called Swift Fox, 15 summers old. His first buffalo hunt was to be next spring. He prodded the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the winter air. "And I'm sorry about your husband." They finished their small meal in a more companionable silence, the shared experience of loss creating a fragile bridge between their vastly different worlds. As Red Eagle prepared to continue their journey, Eleanor tried to stand, only to have her legs buckle beneath her. He caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms steadying her. "You are weaker than you admit," he observed, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Eleanor straightened, frustrated by her body's betrayal. "I'll manage." Red Eagle studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Courage without wisdom is a fast path to the spirit world." He gestured to the travois. "You will ride there until we reach the next shelter." Eleanor started to protest, but the firm set of his jaw told her the decision wasn't open for debate. With as much dignity as she could muster, she allowed him to help her onto the makeshift sled, settling herself among the furs. "This will slow our progress," she pointed. "Out." "Yes," he agreed simply. "But a slower journey completed is better than a fast one abandoned." They continued through the afternoon, the landscape transforming as Red Eagle led them away from the scattered farmsteads and into wilder territory. The rolling plains gave way to more rugged terrain, with outcroppings of rock jutting through, the snow like the bones of the earth itself. By nightfall, they reached what appeared to be an abandoned trapper's cabin, half hidden in a grove of pines. Eleanor was shivering uncontrollably by then, the cold having seeped through the furs to settle deep in her bones. Red Eagle helped her inside, where the walls at least provided shelter from the biting wind. "This place was built by a French trapper," he explained as he set about making a fire in the small stone hearth. "He respected the old ways, asked permission to hunt in our territories, traded fairly." "What happened to him?" Eleanor asked, huddling close to the growing flames. "Smallpox, 3 winters ago." Red Eagle's expression was grim. "The same sickness that took half my village when I was a boy." Eleanor remembered the stories she'd heard about devastating epidemics among the native tribes brought by European settlers. Another debt of suffering that could never be repaid. As the cabin slowly warmed, Red Eagle unwrapped a small bundle from his pack, revealing various herbs and powders. With practiced movements, he mixed some with water from his water skin, creating a pungent paste. "Your bandages must be changed," he said, gesturing to her ribs. "This will help fight the corruption that sometimes follows such injuries." Eleanor hesitated. The thought of removing her clothing, even partially, in front of this man, this stranger, sent a flush of embarrassment through her. Red Eagle seemed to read her thoughts. "I have sisters," he said simply, "and I have treated many wounds. There is no shame in healing." His matter-of-fact approach eased her discomfort somewhat. With his help, she loosened her dress just enough to allow access to the bandages around her ribs. His touch remained clinical as he applied the medicine, his focus entirely on tending her injuries. "The bones are not as badly broken as I feared," he commented, as he secured fresh buckskin strips around her torso. "You are fortunate." Eleanor gave a hollow laugh. "Fortunate is not the word I would choose for my situation." Red Eagle's eyes met hers, unexpectedly gentle. "You live. Your enemies believe you are dead. Sometimes this is the best fortune a warrior can hope for." "I'm hardly a warrior," Eleanor said, adjusting her clothing once he had finished. "No?" Red Eagle raised an eyebrow. "You survived an attack that should have killed you. You endured. Days alone with injuries that would make many men weep. You choose to fight for life when death would be easier." He shrugged. "These are the actions of a warrior." Eleanor had never thought of herself in such terms. In Philadelphia, she had been taught that a woman's strength lay in her gentleness, her ability to create a peaceful home. The frontier had begun to change those notions, but Red Eagle's perspective was something entirely new. "In your tribe," she asked hesitantly, "what is the role of women?" Red Eagle settled back, adding more wood to the fire. "They are the heart of the people. They raise the children, prepare the hides, make the decisions about moving camp. Some are healers, with knowledge passed down through generations. Some join war parties." His eyes took on a distant look. "My grandmother once counted a coup on a Crow warrior who threatened her daughter. She rode into battle alongside my grandfather. The image of such a woman, fierce, protective, honored for her courage, stirred something in Eleanor. How different from the tight constraints of the society she had left behind in the East, where women were expected to be decorative, compliant, and above all, dependent. "Get some rest," Red Eagle advised, breaking into her thoughts. "Tomorrow will be harder. We climb." Eleanor settled into her makeshift bed of furs near the fire, watching as Red Eagle positioned himself near the door, ever vigilant. Despite the unfamiliarity of her situation, she felt a curious sense of security in his presence. For the first time since the attack, she slept without fear. The morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Eleanor awoke to find Red Eagle already, preparing for their departure, having caught and dressed 2 rabbits at dawn. "Eat," he instructed, handing her a portion of the meat he had roasted over the rekindled fire. "We have far to go today." Eleanor's body felt marginally stronger, the combination of rest, food, and Red Eagle's medicines beginning to work their effect. Still, she knew she was far from recovered. "Tell me about these men we're both hunting," she said as they ate. "You said there were 7. I only saw 5 at our cabin," Red Eagle nodded. "They are led by a man with a scar across his chin, hair the color of sand, eyes like ice." "That's him," Eleanor confirmed, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. "He's the one who—" She touched her ribs unconsciously. "Jacob Rawlins," Red Eagle supplied. "A deserter from the army. The others follow him because he has no fear and no mercy. Such men attract those who mistake cruelty for strength." "You know his name?" Eleanor said, surprised. "I make it my business to know the names of my enemies." Red Eagle's expression hardened. "Especially those who harm the innocent." "How do you plan to find them in this?" Eleanor gestured to the vast expanse of snow-covered landscape visible through the cabin's small window. They head for the Black Hills. There are only 3 passes still open this time of year. Red Eagle's confidence was unwavering. And men who believe they have nothing to fear leave clear signs for those who know how to read them. Eleanor thought of the casual way the outlaws had left her to die, their certainty that no one would come for her or seek justice for what they had done. Perhaps their arrogance would be their undoing. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern horizon, Eleanor insisting on riding the horse while Red Eagle walked alongside. The terrain grew more challenging as they progressed, the gentle rolls of the plains giving way to steeper inclines and narrow ravines. By midday, they were climbing through a landscape of pine-covered slopes and rocky outcroppings. "We are entering the sacred lands," Red Eagle informed her as they paused to rest the horse. "The Paha Sapa, what your people call the Black Hills." Eleanor had heard of the Black Hills, of course. Even in Philadelphia, there had been newspaper accounts of gold discovered in these mountains, setting off yet another rush of white settlers into territory long held sacred by the Sioux. "I've heard your people believe these hills are holy ground," she said carefully. Red Eagle's expression was difficult to read. "They are the heart of everything that is, the place where our people were born." He gazed up at the dark pines that gave the hills their name. "Now your government wants to buy them, as if the sacred could be owned or sold. And your people refuse to sell," Eleanor said, recalling the heated debates she had overheard in town about the Indian problem. "Would you sell the bones of your ancestors?" Red Eagle asked simply, "or the place where your gods speak to you?" Put that way, the Sioux resistance seemed not just reasonable, but inevitable. Eleanor wondered how many other aspects of this conflict had been misrepresented in the newspapers and parlor discussions back east. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the path growing steeper and more treacherous. Several times, Red Eagle had to help Eleanor dismount and lead the horse through particularly difficult passages, her weakened condition making the going slow. As the daylight began to fade, they reached a sheltered plateau overlooking a valley. Below, Red Eagle held up his hand for silence, dropping to a crouch and motioning for Eleanor to do the same. In the gathering dusk, she could just make out the flicker of a campfire in the distance, beside what appeared to be a small stream. "Is it them?" she whispered, her heart suddenly pounding. Red Eagle nodded grimly. 5 men. 2 horses are missing." He studied the distant camp. "They wait for something, or someone." Eleanor felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear at the proximity of the men who had nearly killed her, and a fierce desire for justice that surprised her with its intensity. "What will you do?" she asked. Red Eagle turned to look at her, his expression once again unreadable. "What would you have me do, Eleanor Blackwood? Kill them in their sleep? Challenge them openly? Take you to safety and return later for vengeance?" The question caught her off guard. She had assumed he would make such decisions without consulting her. That he asked her opinion seemed significant, though she couldn't have said why. "I want them to pay for what they did," she said after a moment. "To my husband, to your nephew, to all those they've hurt." She met his gaze steadily. "But I don't want more death if it can be avoided." Something like respect flickered in Red Eagle's eyes. "Sometimes the greatest victory is to deny your enemy the battle they seek." He looked back toward the distant campfire. "We go around. There is another path to my people's winter camp, longer but safer." Eleanor felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of her had wanted to confront the men who had destroyed her life, to see them face consequences for their actions. But another part, the practical, survival-oriented part that the frontier had nurtured, recognized the wisdom in Red Eagle's decision. They retreated carefully from their vantage point, making camp in a small cave set into the mountainside. The space was tight but well protected from both the elements and prying eyes. Red Eagle built a small fire near the entrance, positioning it so that the smoke would disperse before becoming visible against the darkening sky. "How did you become a war chief?" Eleanor asked as they shared a meager meal of dried meat and some roots Red Eagle had dug from beneath the snow. Red Eagle was silent for so long that Eleanor thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "I was 19 summers old. U.S. Army soldiers attacked our summer camp on the Powder River. They claimed we had stolen horses from a nearby fort." His eyes reflected the dancing flames of their small fire. "We had not, but truth mattered little to them," he paused, lost in memories. "They killed many, including my father, who was attempting to negotiate peace. I led a group of young warriors to protect the women and children as they fled. We held off the soldiers long enough for most to escape." A muscle twitches in his jaw. "When it was over, the elders said I had shown the wisdom of a chief and the courage of a warrior. They gave me my name, Red Eagle, and made me the war chief of our band." Eleanor tried to imagine the young man he had been, suddenly thrust into leadership through violence and loss. "It's a heavy burden to bear so young," she said softly. Red Eagle's gaze shifted to her. "And you? What burdens did you carry before coming to this frontier?" The question was unexpected. Eleanor had grown accustomed to thinking of herself primarily as Thomas's wife, a settler's spouse. Her life before had seemed increasingly distant, almost like a story that had happened to someone else. "I was a healer's apprentice in Philadelphia," she said. "My parents died of influenza when I was 16. I had no brothers or sisters, no inheritance, except my mother's knowledge of herbs and remedies." She smiled faintly at the memory. "I worked for Dr. Joseph Miller, preparing medicines, assisting with treatments. That's where I met Thomas. He came in with a broken arm. He'd fallen from a scaffold while working on a new church." "You loved him," Red Eagle observed. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Eleanor acknowledged, surprised to find she could speak of Thomas without the sharp pain that had accompanied her earlier memories. "He was kind, steady, full of dreams about building a new life out west." She looked down at her hands. "Rough now from frontier work. I was 27, beginning to believe I would never marry. When he proposed, it seemed like fate." Red Eagle nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My wife was called Morning Star. She died giving birth to our son. He lived only 2 days." He spoke matter-of-factly, but Eleanor could sense the old grief beneath his words. "That was 5 winters ago." "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, meaning it. Loss, it seemed, was a language they both spoke fluently. "The Lakota believe that those who have walked on are never truly gone," Red Eagle said. "Their spirits remain with us, guiding our steps until we join them in the spirit world." He added more wood to the fire. "Perhaps your Thomas watches over you still." The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Eleanor had been raised in the Christian tradition, with its clear delineation between heaven and earth. The idea that Thomas might still be present in some form, witnessing her unlikely alliance with this Sioux warrior, made her wonder what he would think of her current situation. As if reading her thoughts, Red Eagle spoke again. "Tomorrow we reach my people's winter camp. They will be surprised to see you." Dawn broke, with the sky the color of burnished copper, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of amber and gold. Eleanor awoke to find Red Eagle already standing at the cave entrance, his tall silhouette framed against the morning light. There was a stillness to his posture that spoke of deep contemplation. "The outlaws have moved on," he announced without turning. "Their tracks lead southwest, away from our path." Eleanor felt a curious mixture of relief and disappointment. The men, who had destroyed her life were slipping away, perhaps never to face justice for their crimes. Yet their continued journey meant safety for her and Red Eagle. "How far is your people's camp?" she asked, wincing as she sat up. Despite Red Eagle's medicines, her body still protested every movement. "We will reach it before sunset, if the weather holds." He finally turned to face her, his expression serious. "Before we continue, you must understand what awaits you there." Eleanor tensed. Throughout their journey, she had pushed aside thoughts of what might happen when they reached their destination. Now, the reality could no longer be ignored. "Will they welcome me?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Red Eagle chose his words carefully. "My people have suffered much at the hands of white settlers. Some have lost children, parents, siblings. They will see your face and remember their pain." He crouched down to her level, his dark eyes intent. "But you will be under my protection. No harm will come to you. And after?" Eleanor pressed. "What happens to me once I've healed?" A faint smile touched Red Eagle's lips. "One step at a time, Eleanor Blackwood. First, you must heal. Then, we will speak of what comes after." They broke their fast with the last of the dried meat and prepared to depart. Outside, the temperature had risen slightly, creating a treacherous layer of ice beneath the fresh snow. Red Eagle helped Eleanor onto his horse, adjusting the furs around her with unexpected gentleness. "The path ahead is difficult," he warned. "Hold tight to the mane." Eleanor did as instructed, gripping the horse's thick mane as Red Eagle led them along a narrow trail that wound through stands of pine and over rocky ridges. The landscape grew increasingly breathtaking, vast vistas of snow-covered hills giving way to deep valleys carved by ancient glaciers. Under different circumstances, Eleanor might have marveled at the wild beauty surrounding her. Now she focused only on staying upright and ignoring the persistent ache in her ribs. By midday, they had descended into a sheltered valley, where the snow was shallower and patches of exposed grass provided forage for the horse. Red Eagle called a brief halt, allowing Eleanor to stretch her cramped muscles while the animal grazed. "There's something I need to ask you," Eleanor said as they shared a waterskin. "These men, the ones who attacked us both, you said they're heading southwest." Red Eagle nodded, his expression guarded. "That's toward Fort Robinson, isn't it?" She continued, "Where are the treaty negotiations happening?" A flicker of surprise crossed Red Eagle's face. "You know about this." "I heard talk in the settlement," Eleanor explained. "Army officers saying that representatives from Washington were coming to meet with Sioux leaders about the Black Hills." Red Eagle's jaw tightened. Not to meet, to threaten, to demand, to offer trinkets for sacred land. He looked away, scanning the distant horizon. "But yes, these men move in that direction. It is concerning." "You think they plan to disrupt the negotiations?" Eleanor suggested. "Create more conflict between settlers and Sioux?" "Perhaps." Red Eagle's gaze returned to her, assessment in his eyes. "You see clearly for one raised among white ways." Eleanor thought of Thomas, of his dreams for their frontier life, of how he had respected the native peoples they encountered. "My husband believed there was room enough for all in this country, if only men could set aside greed and fear." A rare vision, Red Eagle acknowledged, one shared by few of any color. He helped her back onto the horse. "Come, we must reach the camp before dark." They continued through the afternoon, the sun hanging low in the western sky as they crested a final ridge. Below them, nestled in a protected valley beside a frozen creek, Eleanor saw a collection of conical structures, teepees, she realized, arranged in a large circle. Smoke rose from openings at their tops, and figures moved among them, tending fires or leading horses to shelter. The winter camp of Red Eagle's band. "It's larger than I expected," she murmured. "3 bands together for winter," Red Eagle explained. "Stronger against both weather and enemies." He glanced at her, his expression once again serious. "Stay close to me. Speak only when spoken to. Do not show fear." Eleanor straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I understand." Their approach was noticed immediately. Children playing at the camp's edge spotted them first, pointing and calling out in their language. Within moments, warriors emerged from the teepees, some with weapons in hand. They formed a line across the path, faces impassive as they waited for the unexpected visitors. Red Eagle raised his hand in greeting, calling out words Eleanor couldn't understand. There was a moment of tense silence before one of the warriors stepped forward, an older man with silver streaking his long black hair and deep lines etched into his face. "Yellow Bear," Red Eagle murmured to Eleanor. "Elder of the Buffalo Horn Band, a wise man, but cautious." Yellow Bear spoke rapidly in Lakota, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. Red Eagle replied calmly, gesturing occasionally toward her. Eleanor remained still, conscious of dozens of stares fixed upon her, some curious, others openly hostile. Finally, Yellow Bear approached, stopping directly before the horse. He studied Eleanor with piercing eyes, then spoke in halting English. "Red Eagle says you were left to die by white men who also killed our people." His weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Why should we welcome the enemy into our camp?" Eleanor met his gaze directly, remembering Red Eagle's advice not to show fear. "I am not your enemy, Elder Yellow Bear. I seek no harm to your people. Yet harm follows the white man like shadow follows sun," Yellow Bear countered. Red Eagle spoke again in Lakota, his tone firm but respectful. Yellow Bear listened, occasionally nodding, his expression gradually softening. "He says you saved my life," Eleanor said when Red Eagle had finished. "Why would you do this?" Yellow Bear's question caught her off guard. Why indeed had Red Eagle risked so much to help a white woman he had no obligation toward? "Because he is a man of honor," she answered simply. "Because he saw someone in need and chose compassion over hatred." Yellow Bear considered her words, then turned to address the gathering in Lakota. After a brief discussion, he faced them again. "You may enter our camp, a woman called Eleanor," he pronounced. "Red Eagle stands for you. If you bring trouble, it falls on him also." His stern expression softened slightly. "We too know what it is to lose a family to violence." With that, the line of warriors parted, allowing them to proceed into the camp. Children darted alongside them, staring openly at Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. Women paused in their work to watch, their expressions ranging from suspicion to curiosity to outright hostility. Red Eagle led them to a tipi near the center of the camp. It was larger than many of the others, with painted symbols adorning its hide covering. A woman stood outside, middle-aged but still striking with the same proud bearing as Red Eagle himself. "My sister, Singing Bird," Red Eagle explained as he helped Eleanor dismount, "widow of Strong Shield, mother of Swift Fox, who was killed." Eleanor's heart sank. This was the mother of the young man slain by the same outlaws who had attacked her. New homestead. What welcome could she possibly expect here? To her surprise, Singing Bird inclined her head in greeting, her expression solemn but not unkind. She spoke briefly to Red Eagle, who translated. She says, "You are welcome to share her fire and food. She has prepared medicines for your injuries." "Please tell her I'm grateful," Eleanor replied, humbled by this unexpected generosity from a woman who had every reason to resent her presence. Inside the teepee, Eleanor discovered a world unlike anything she had known before. The circular space was warm and surprisingly comfortable, with buffalo robes covering the ground and personal belongings neatly arranged around the perimeter. A small fire burned in a central pit, its smoke rising to exit through the opening at the top. Singing Bird gestured for Eleanor to sit on a robe near the fire, then began examining her injuries with gentle but thorough hands. She spoke quietly to Red Eagle as she worked. "My sister says the broken ribs are healing well, but there is still swelling inside that concerns her," he translated. "She will prepare stronger medicine." Singing Bird moved to a collection of pouches and bundles, selecting various herbs and roots with practiced precision. As she worked, a young girl of perhaps 12 entered the teepee, carrying a wooden bowl of steaming broth. She set it beside Eleanor, her dark eyes wide with curiosity. "My niece, Little Deer," Red Eagle explained. "Daughter of Singing Bird's eldest." Eleanor smiled at the girl. "Thank you," she said, taking the bowl gratefully. Little Deer returned the smile shyly before retreating to help her grandmother with the medicines. The rich broth, some kind of game meat flavored with unfamiliar herbs, revived Eleanor's strength considerably. As she ate, Red Eagle explained the situation to his sister in greater detail, occasionally gesturing toward Eleanor as he spoke. Though she couldn't understand the words, Eleanor could read the emotions that crossed Singing Bird's face. Grief for her lost son, anger at his killers, and something more complex when she looked at Eleanor, a reluctant recognition, perhaps, of shared suffering. When Red Eagle had finished speaking, Singing Bird approached Eleanor again, a steaming cup of dark liquid in her hands. She spoke directly to her this time, though the words were incomprehensible. She says, "This medicine will help the broken bones knit together more strongly," Red Eagle translated, "and ease the pain that makes it hard for you to breathe deeply." Eleanor accepted the cup with murmured thanks, drinking the bitter concoction without hesitation. Her trust in these people, strangers who should by all rights have been her enemies, felt as surprising to her as it clearly did to them. As twilight deepened, outside, more visitors arrived at the teepee. First came Yellow Bear, accompanied by 2 other elders whose names Eleanor couldn't catch. They spoke at length with Red Eagle, occasionally glancing her way, but addressing no questions directly to her. After they left, several women entered, bringing additional furs, clothing, and food. Their manner was reserved but not hostile, their curiosity evident in the surreptitious glances they cast at the white woman in their midst. By the time night had fully fallen, Eleanor was exhausted. The day's journey, combined with the strain of her introduction to the camp and the effects of Singing Bird's medicine, had depleted what little strength she had regained. Red Eagle noticed her fatigue and spoke quietly to his sister, who immediately began arranging sleeping furs on one side of the teepee. "Rest now," he instructed Eleanor. "Tomorrow will bring many questions." "You're leaving?" Eleanor asked, suddenly anxious at the thought of being alone among strangers whose language she couldn't speak. "I must meet with the council," Red Eagle explained. "But Singing Bird will remain. You are safe here." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Eleanor for some time after Red Eagle's departure. She lay in the unfamiliar darkness, listening to Singing Bird's quiet movements as she tended the fire and prepared for her own rest. The sounds of the camp gradually diminished outside, voices falling silent, footsteps fading, until only the occasional bark of a dog or whining of a horse disturbed the night. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to Thomas, to the life they had planned together on their small homestead. How quickly it had all unraveled, leading her here to this place she could never have imagined. What would he think of her now, sleeping in a Sioux teepee, accepting the hospitality of people they had been taught to fear? Somehow she felt he would understand. Thomas had always looked beyond surface differences to see humanity in others. She woke to the smell of cooking food and soft voices speaking in Lakota. Opening her eyes, Eleanor found Little Deer watching her with undisguised fascination. The girl smiled when she saw Eleanor was awake and called to Singing Bird, who was tending a pot over the fire. Singing Bird approached with a cup of the same medicine from the previous night, gesturing for Eleanor to drink it. As Eleanor complied, Red Eagle entered the teepee, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the scent of pine. "The council has decided," he announced without preamble. "You may stay until your injuries are healed. Then you must choose: return to your people or journey to the agency at Fort Robinson." Eleanor sat up straighter, surprised by the finality of his tone. "What about the men who attacked us? Jacob Rawlins and his gang?" A shadow crossed Red Eagle's face. "Scouts report they have joined with others near Fort Robinson. Their numbers grow." He hesitated, then added, "There is more. A large cavalry force approaches from the east. The treaty delegation arrives soon." Eleanor absorbed this information, understanding its implications. Tensions would be running high, with the potential for violence magnified by the presence of men like Rawlins, who profited from conflict. "I should go to Fort Robinson," she said, the decision forming even as she spoke the words. "I can testify about what these men did, to me, to your people. Maybe prevent more bloodshed." Red Eagle's expression remained guarded. "Why would army commanders believe a white woman who travels with Sioux? They will say we have corrupted your mind." "Then I'll find someone who will listen," Eleanor insisted. "Thomas always said justice needs witnesses willing to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable." Singing Bird asked a question, her tone sharp with concern. Red Eagle replied, gesturing toward Eleanor as he spoke. Whatever he said caused Singing Bird to stare at Eleanor with new intensity, reassessment in her dark eyes. "What did you tell her?" Eleanor asked. "That you seek justice, not safety," Red Eagle answered. "She says this makes you either very brave or very foolish." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps both." The day unfolded in a blur of new experiences for Eleanor. With her strength gradually returning under Singing Bird's care, she was able to venture outside the teepee, always accompanied by either Red Eagle or Little Deer, who had appointed herself Eleanor's unofficial guide. The camp's initial wariness toward her had not entirely disappeared, but it had evolved into something more like cautious acceptance. Women nodded to her as she passed. Children stared openly but without fear. Warriors acknowledged her presence with brief inclinations of their heads. Only a few maintained open hostility, turning away or spitting on the ground when she approached. Little Deer took evident pride in showing Eleanor the daily life of the camp. Women scraping hides or weaving baskets, men crafting weapons or tools, elders teaching younger generations the stories and songs of their people. Eleanor watched with genuine interest, recognizing the deep bonds of community that held these people together in the face of hardship and persecution. By late afternoon, she found herself seated outside Singing Bird's teepee, wrapped in thick furs. Against the cold, observing a group of young girls playing a game involving carved bones and painted sticks. Little Deer had joined them, occasionally glancing back at Eleanor, as if to make sure she was watching. Red Eagle appeared from the direction of the council teepee, his expression troubled. He sat beside Eleanor, following her gaze to the playing. "Children, they have known little peace in their short lives," he said quietly. "Always moving, always watching for soldiers or settlers who might drive us from our camps." "It's wrong," Eleanor said simply. "What's being done to your people?" Red Eagle gave her a sideways glance. "Such words are rarely heard from white mouths. Perhaps they should be spoken more often." Eleanor met his gaze. "What troubles you? Is there news?" Red Eagle hesitated, then nodded. "Scouts report the cavalry force camps just 2 days' ride from here. They search for our winter camp." His jaw tightened, "and Rawlins's men move with them as guides." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "They're using the soldiers to find you, to finish what they started." "So it seems." Red Eagle's voice was grim. The council debates whether to break camp and move deeper into the hills. But in winter, with children and elders, Eleanor shook her head. Many would not survive such a journey, and many may not survive if we stay. The Red Eagle stood abruptly. I must return to the council. Later we will speak more of Fort Robinson and your plan to seek justice. As he strode away, Eleanor remained where she sat, watching little deer laugh with her friends, blissfully unaware of the danger approaching. A fierce protectiveness welled up inside her, not just for this child who had welcomed her without prejudice, but for all the people of this camp who had offered her shelter when they had every reason to turn her away. In that moment, Eleanor Blackwood made a decision that would alter the course of not only her life, but the lives of many others. She would not be merely a witness to injustice. She would act. The council meeting lasted well into the night. Eleanor waited in Singing Bird's teepee, helping the older woman prepare herbs and watching her methodical movements as she worked. Despite the language barrier between them, a tenuous understanding had begun to form. Two women from vastly different worlds, connected by shared grief and a common enemy. Little Deer had fallen asleep on her furs, her young face peaceful in slumber. Untroubled by the dangers threatening her people, Eleanor found herself studying the child, wondering what future awaited her in a world that seemed determined to erase her way of life. When Red Eagle finally returned, his expression told Eleanor everything she needed to know before he spoke a word. "The council is divided," he said, accepting a cup of tea from his sister. "Some wish to flee deeper into the sacred hills. Others believe we should stand our ground." His eyes met Eleanor's. Yellow Bear asked what the white woman would do if she were leading her people. Eleanor was startled. "What did you tell him?" "That I would ask you yourself." Red Eagle's gaze was steady. "So I ask now, what would you do, Eleanor Blackwood, if these were your people facing enemies on all sides?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Eleanor took a moment to consider her response, aware that her words might carry more weight than she had realized. "I would not run," she said finally. "Not in winter, not with children and elders who might not survive the journey." She leaned forward, her voice low but intense. "But I would not wait passively for destruction either. I would seek a third path." "And what path is that?" Red Eagle asked, interest flickering in his dark eyes. "Send me to Fort Robinson," Eleanor proposed, "before the soldiers find this camp. I can speak to the treaty delegation, tell them about Rawlins and his men, how they attack both settlers and Sioux to profit from the conflict." Singing Bird spoke rapidly in Lakota, her tone sharp with concern. Red Eagle replied, then turned. "Back to Eleanor." "My sister thinks this plan would end with your death," he translated. "Rawlins would not allow you to speak against him." "Then I won't approach you openly," Eleanor countered. "There must be someone at the fort, an officer, a government official, who would listen if approached correctly." Red Eagle studied her, assessment in his gaze. "You would do this? Risk your life for people who are strangers to you?" Eleanor thought of Thomas, of his belief in justice that transcended the divisions of race and background. "These men killed my husband," she said simply. "They killed your nephew. They've left a trail of suffering behind them that will only grow longer if someone doesn't stop them." She met Red Eagle's gaze unflinchingly. "I have nothing left to lose." A long silence followed her words. Finally, Red Eagle spoke again, his voice quiet but resolved. "There is one who might help, a cavalry officer named Captain Michael Harrison. He has dealt fairly with my people in the past. His mother was Cherokee. He understands something of both worlds." It was a simple structure. Logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney, a single window covered with oiled paper rather than glass. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the evening breeze. Eleanor approached cautiously, alert for any sign that the cabin might already be occupied. Finding it empty, she led the horse to a lean-to attached to the cabin's side, where it would have some protection from the elements. Then, gathering her courage, she entered the abandoned dwelling. The interior was dark and musty, but relatively intact. A rough-hewn table, a stool, a frame for a bed now stripped of its furs. The trapper had taken his bedding with him when he left, but the structure itself remained sound. Best of all, there was a small stack of firewood beside the hearth, enough to keep her warm through the night. Eleanor set about making the cabin habitable, working methodically to distract herself from her fear and uncertainty. She built a small fire, careful to keep it low, so the smoke wouldn't be visible from a distance. She arranged her meager supplies, setting aside what she would need for the final leg of her journey in the morning. She tended to her horse, giving it water from the creek and a measure of grain from the supplies Red Eagle had provided. Only when these tasks were completed did she allow herself to sink onto the stool beside the fire, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Her ribs ached from the day's ride, and her mind was a tangle of worries, for Red Eagle and Grey Wolf facing Rawlins's men, for the Sioux camp preparing for possible attack, for her own uncertain mission to Fort Robinson. She drew Yellow Bear's carved eagle from her pocket, running her fingers over its smooth contours. "Keen sight and strong heart," she murmured, recalling his words. She would need both in the days ahead. A sudden sound outside the cabin brought Eleanor to her feet, heart pounding. She doused the fire quickly, plunging the interior into darkness, and pressed herself against the wall beside the window, straining to hear hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching slowly, deliberately, not passing by but coming directly toward the cabin. Eleanor's mind raced. Had she been followed? Was it Rawlins's men, the cavalry, or perhaps Red Eagle returning after successfully leading the patrol astray? She reached for the knife Red Eagle had given her, a poor weapon against firearms, but better than nothing. The hoofbeats stopped just outside. She heard men's voices speaking in English rather than Lakota. "Smoke was fresh," one said. "Someone's been here recently." "Check inside," another commanded, "and the lean-to." Eleanor's blood ran cold as she recognized the second voice, the flat, merciless tone that had haunted her nightmares since the attack on her homestead. Jacob Rawlins had found her. Eleanor froze as the cabin door creaked open. Pressed against the wall in darkness, her hand gripping the knife, she hardly dared breathe as a shaft of moonlight cut across the dirt floor. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, the outline of a rifle clearly visible. "Check it thoroughly," Rawlins's voice commanded from outside. "Could be hiding anywhere." The man stepped into the cabin, moving cautiously. As her eyes adjusted, Eleanor could make out his features. Young, perhaps no more than 20, with a wispy beard and nervous eyes. One of Rawlins's newer recruits, she guessed, not one of the men who had attacked her homestead. The young man moved toward the hearth, crouching to touch the ashes. "Fire's still warm?" he called out. "Someone was here recently?" "Injun or white?" came Rawlins' reply. The man stood, moving toward the table where Eleanor had left a cup from Singing Bird. "Looks like Injun stuff to me. Some kind of herb pouch. Here." Eleanor realized she had mere moments before he would turn and discover her. Her mind raced, calculating her slim odds. The window beside her was too small for escape. The only exit was the door, currently blocked by the young outlaw and beyond him, Rawlins, and who knew how many others. The decision was made for her when the horse in the lean-to nickered softly, drawing the man's attention toward the rear of the cabin, and directly toward Eleanor's hiding place. "What the—" he began, catching sight of her shadow. Eleanor acted on instinct, lunging forward with the knife. Her aim was poor, but desperation lent her strength. The blade caught the man, in the arm, rather than the chest she'd targeted. He yelped in pain, stumbling backward and dropping his rifle as he clutched at the wound. "Damn it all!" he shouted. "Someone's in here!" Eleanor didn't wait. Snatching up the fallen rifle, she charged past the wounded man, bursting through the door into the frigid night air. She had one chance: reach the horse and flee before Rawlins and his men could react. Outside, chaos erupted. Two men stood by their horses, turning in surprise at her sudden appearance. Behind them, Jacob Rawlins himself, instantly recognizable despite the months since she'd seen him. His sand-colored hair gleamed in the moonlight, his cold eyes widening. In shock as he recognized her, "Well, I'll be damned," he drawled, recovering quickly. "If it ain't the homesteader's wife. Thought you'd be rotting in that cabin by now." Eleanor leveled the rifle at him, her hands surprisingly steady. "Step aside, Rawlins, I'm leaving." A cruel smile spread across his face. "Don't think so, ma'am. You're quite the surprise package. Folks back at the fort will be mighty interested to hear how we found Thomas Blackwood's widow playing house with a bunch of savages." "The only savages I've encountered lately have been white men," Eleanor retorted, taking a step toward her horse. The animal was still in the lean-to, just a few yards away. Rawlins chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Boys, looks like we got ourselves a genuine Injun lover here." He took a step toward her. "Put down that rifle, Mrs. Blackwood. You and I both know you ain't going to shoot me." For a heartbeat, Eleanor considered proving him wrong. Her finger tightened on the trigger, Thomas's face flashing in her mind, his gentle smile the day they'd wed, his broken body in Martha Wilson's wagon. But shooting Rawlins now would accomplish nothing except her own swift death at the hands of his men. Her mission was too important to throw away in a moment of vengeance. The hesitation cost her dearly. The young man she'd stabbed emerged from the cabin behind her, blood streaking his sleeve. With a grunt of pain and rage, he charged, knocking Eleanor sideways. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the night sky as she fell, the weapon wrenched from her grasp. "Got her, Mr. Rawlins," the young outlaw announced proudly, pinning Eleanor to the ground with a knee in her back. The pressure on her injured ribs sent waves of agony through her body. "Well done, Billy," Rawlins approved, approaching at a leisurely pace. He crouched beside Eleanor, grabbing her hair to lift her face toward his. "Now then, Mrs. Blackwood, why don't you tell me how you survived our little visit to your homestead and what you're doing out here all alone?" "I'm not telling you anything," Eleanor spat, tasting blood where her lip had split in the fall. Rawlins sighed theatrically. "Always the hard way with you people." He stood, addressing his men. "Tie her up. We'll take her back to the patrol. Major Collins will want to question her himself." A nasty grin spread across his face. "A white woman living with the Sioux during a time of war. That's a hanging offense in these parts." "She stabbed me," protested the young outlaw, Billy, still pressing his knee painfully into Eleanor's back. "And you'll get your chance to pay her back," Rawlins assured him. "But right now, she's worth more to us alive. The Major's looking for any excuse to move against those Sioux hiding in the hills. A white captive would be just the thing." "I wasn't a captive," Eleanor managed through gritted teeth. "They saved my life after you tried to take it." Rawlins laughed. "Well, ain't that touching? You hear that, boys? The widow's gone native." He nodded to the third man. "Jenkins, get the rope. Billy, get off her before you break something important. She needs to be able to ride." As the pressure on her back eased, Eleanor gasped for breath, her mind racing for some way out of this disaster. She had failed the Sioux who had sheltered her, failed Red Eagle who had risked so much to save her life, failed Thomas, and the justice he deserved. They bound her wrists tightly, the rough rope cutting into her skin. Rawlins himself checked the knots, his face close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Don't look so glum, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured. "You're about to be rescued from your savage friends." He patted her cheek with mock tenderness. "Course, once you've served your purpose, we'll have to make sure you can't tell tales about who really killed your husband." Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "You won't get away with this, Rawlins. There are people who know what you've done." "More savages?" he sneered. It doesn't matter. By this time tomorrow, there'll be a lot fewer of them to worry about. He straightened, issuing orders. Jenkins, she rides with you. Billy, you're on point. Let's move out before those Injuns she's running with come looking for her. They hoisted Eleanor onto Jenkins's horse, her bound hands making it difficult to keep her balance. Her ribs screamed in protest at the rough handling, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of hearing her cry out. As they prepared to depart, a distant sound carried on the night air, a wolf's howl, eerie and prolonged. The men paused, looking uneasily into the darkness beyond the cabin. Just a wolf, Rawlins dismissed. Though his hand strayed to his pistol, a second howl answered the first, this one from a different direction, then a third closer than either of the others. Billy shifted nervously. That doesn't sound like no. Natural wolves, Mr. Rawlins. Eleanor felt a surge of hope. The pattern of calls was too deliberate, too precise to be natural. Someone was out there, watching, signaling. Red Eagle had not abandoned her after all. It's nothing, Rawlins insisted. Mount up. We need to rejoin the patrol by dawn. They rode away from the cabin. Eleanor perched uncomfortably in front of Jenkins, her bound hands clutching the saddle horn for balance. They followed the creek downstream, moving at a cautious pace in the darkness. Every few minutes, the wolf. Calls would sound again, sometimes nearer, sometimes farther away, but always keeping pace with their progress. Eleanor felt Jenkins's tension in the rigid way he held himself, his head constantly swiveling to scan the shadows. Even Rawlins, for all his bravado, kept his rifle across his lap, ready for immediate use. They had traveled perhaps 2 miles when the attack came, sudden, silent, and devastating in its precision. An arrow whistled out of the darkness, striking Billy's horse in the flank. The animal reared in pain, throwing its rider before bolting into the night. Almost simultaneously, a second arrow found Jenkins' thigh. The man screamed, his arms reflexively releasing the reins to clutch at the wound. Eleanor didn't hesitate. As the horse beneath her skittered sideways in panic, she flung herself from the saddle, hitting the ground hard and rolling away from the trail. Pain exploded through her injured ribs, but she forced herself to keep moving, crawling toward the shelter of a nearby thicket. Behind her, chaos erupted. Gunshots cracked through the night as Rawlins and the remaining outlaw fired, blindly into the darkness. More arrows rained down, accompanied now by war cries that seemed to come from all directions at once. "It's an ambush," Rawlins shouted. "Fall back! Fall back!" From her hiding place, Eleanor watched the scene unfold like some terrible dream. Shadows moved among the trees, warriors on foot, swift and silent, except for their strategic cries designed to magnify their apparent numbers. Jenkins lay motionless where he had fallen. Billy cowered behind a boulder, firing his rifle with shaking hands at targets he couldn't see, and Rawlins, calculating as ever, was already retreating, abandoning his men as he spurred his horse back the way they had come. A figure materialized beside Eleanor, making her jump. "Be still," Grey Wolf whispered in halting English. He sliced through her bonds with a quick flick of his knife. "Follow, quietly." He led her away from the skirmish, moving parallel to the creek through dense underbrush that concealed their passage. Behind them, the gunfire was already growing more sporadic as the outlaws expended their ammunition against phantoms. They emerged in a small clearing where 2 horses waited, one of them the pinto she had ridden earlier. Red Eagle stepped from the shadows, relief evident in his face as he saw her. "You are hurt?" he asked, quickly assessing her condition. "No more than before," Eleanor assured him, though in truth every breath was agony after her fall. "How did you find me?" "We never lost you," Red Eagle replied. "When we saw Rawlins's men following your trail, we circled back." His expression darkened. "If we had been a few minutes later—" "But you weren't," Eleanor said firmly. "You came when I needed you most." She glanced back toward the sounds of conflict. "Your warriors, how many?" A rare smile flickered across Red Eagle's face. "4. But Rawlins will report 20. Despite everything, Eleanor found herself returning his smile. Thank you for not abandoning me. We protect our own, Red Eagle said simply. Then, seeming to realize the implication of his words, he added, we should move. Rawlins will bring the cavalry patrol. We must reach Fort Robinson before they do. You're still coming with me? Eleanor asked, surprised. Red Eagle helped her mount the pinto. The plan has changed. Now Rawlins has seen you alive. He will not rest until you are silenced. His jaw tightened. And he will use your presence among my people as an excuse for violence against them. What about your warriors? Eleanor asked, looking toward the skirmish that was now dying down. They returned to warn the camp, Grey Wolf explained, mounting his own horse. All must move deeper into the hills now. Too dangerous to stay. The reality of what her capture had precipitated hit Eleanor with crushing force. Because of her, an entire community would now be forced to undertake a perilous winter journey, the very outcome she had hoped to prevent. I'm sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. No, Red Eagle said firmly, swinging up behind her on the pinto. The fault lies with men like Rawlins who profit from hatred. You tried to stop them. That path always carries risk. They rode through. The night, following trails only Red Eagle seemed able to see in the darkness. Grey Wolf ranged ahead, scouting for danger, occasionally circling back to report that their way remained clear. The temperature dropped steadily as the hours passed, the cold seeping through Eleanor's layers of clothing to chill her very bones. Red Eagle must have felt her shivering, for he reached around to wrap an additional fur around her shoulders. Not much farther, he murmured. There is shelter ahead where we can rest until dawn. The shelter proved to be a shallow cave at the base of a rocky outcropping, barely deep enough to accommodate the three of them. Grey Wolf built a small fire, while Red Eagle examined Eleanor's injuries, his expression growing concerned as he noted the fresh bruising visible even in the dim light. The binding has broken, he observed, gently probing her ribcage. The bones shift where they should not. Eleanor winced at his touch. Rawlins's man was not gentle when he captured me. Red Eagle's eyes flashed with anger. He will pay for that. All of them will pay. Vengeance won't help your people now, Eleanor reminded him. We need to reach Captain Harrison, tell him the truth about Rawlins before it's too late. Grey Wolf, who had been keeping watch at the cave entrance, spoke urgently in Lakota. Red Eagle replied, his expression grim. What is it? Eleanor asked. Riders on the main trail, Red Eagle translated. Cavalry patrol returning to the fort. Rawlins? Red Eagle nodded. With many soldiers, they ride fast. Eleanor's heart sank. They'll reach Fort Robinson before us. Rawlins will poison everyone against me, against all of you, before we can tell the truth. Then we must find another way in, Red Eagle said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Grey Wolf knows a trader who brings supplies to the fort. His cabin is not far from here. He glanced at the lightning sky visible through the cave entrance. We rest 2 hours, then continue. The trader may help us. Eleanor wanted to protest the delay, but exhaustion was taking its toll. Her body felt leaden, her thoughts increasingly foggy from pain and fatigue. She nodded reluctantly, settling back against the cave wall. Red Eagle prepared another dose of singing bird's medicine, mixing the herbs with water from his water skin. As Eleanor drank the bitter concoction, she studied his face in the firelight. The strong planes of his cheeks, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship, the quiet dignity that seemed as much a part of him as his physical strength. "Why did you really come back for me?" she asked softly. The question that had been nagging at her finally finding voice. You could have returned to your people, moved them to safety. Instead, you risked everything to save one white woman. Red Eagle was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. When I found you in that cabin, he finally said, "You reminded me of something I had begun to forget, that courage knows no color, that honor can exist even among those I had learned to call enemy." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You faced death with dignity. You defended your home as any Lakota would. These things deserve respect." "That explains why you saved me then," Eleanor acknowledged. "Not why you came back tonight." A hint of a smile touched Red Eagle's lips. "Perhaps I'm not ready to lose the person who reminded me that not all white hearts are filled with hatred." He adjusted the fur around her shoulders. "Sleep now. The medicine will help." As Eleanor drifted toward slumber, lulled by the medicine's effects and the hypnotic dance of the fire, she realized that somewhere along their improbable journey together, Red Eagle had become more than her rescuer. He had become a friend, perhaps the truest friend she had ever known. And for the first time since Thomas's death, she found herself thinking not just of the past she had lost, but of a future she might. Yet fine dawn brought a sky the color of hammered steel, heavy with the promise of snow. Eleanor woke to the sound of Grey Wolf and Red Eagle speaking in hushed tones near the cave entrance. Their expressions told her the news wasn't good. "What's happened?" she asked, struggling to sit up despite the protest of her re-injured ribs. Red Eagle turned, concern evident in his face. "More cavalry moving east of here. Many men." He gestured toward the cave entrance. "Grey Wolf saw them from the ridge. They ride toward our winter camp." A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran through Eleanor. "Rawlins must have convinced them the Sioux were responsible for the attack last night. Or he created the excuse he has been seeking," Red Eagle said grimly. "Either way, my people are in danger." Eleanor's mind raced, calculating distances and possibilities. "Your warriors who went back to warn the camp, will they reach it in time?" "If the spirits favor them," Red Eagle replied, though doubt shadowed his eyes. "But moving so much in winter with little preparation." He didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew what it meant. Elders and children struggling through snow, inadequate provisions, exposure to the elements. Deaths were inevitable. "We have to stop this," Eleanor said firmly. "Get to Fort Robinson, find Captain Harrison, make him understand what Rawlins is doing." Grey Wolf spoke again in Lakota, his tone urgent. Red Eagle listened, then nodded sharply. "What did he say?" Eleanor asked. "The trader's cabin is not far," Red Eagle translated. "Samuel Kensington. He has helped my people before, trading fairly when others cheated. Grey Wolf says he may have a wagon we could use." "A wagon would draw less suspicion approaching the fort," Eleanor agreed, seeing the logic. "A white woman and trader arriving together would raise fewer alarms than her current company." "If Kensington agrees to help," Red Eagle cautioned. "Not all white men are willing to stand against their kind, even for justice." The journey to the trader's cabin took less than an hour, following a winding trail down from the hills into more open country. The small homestead came into view as they created a rise, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, a barn, a corral holding several horses, and a vegetator garden now dormant under winter snow. The scene of domestic tranquility seemed almost jarring after the violence of the previous night. They approached cautiously, Red Eagle and Grey Wolf alert for any sign of danger. When they were within half a mile, Red Eagle halted. "Grey Wolf and I cannot be seen," he told Eleanor. "Kensington knows us, but if others are present—" "I'll go alone," Eleanor offered. Red Eagle shook his head firmly. "Too dangerous. Rawlins's men could be anywhere." He studied the homestead thoughtfully. "Grey Wolf will watch from those trees." He pointed to a stand of pines overlooking the cabin. "I will approach from behind. Make sure Kensington is alone. You wait until I signal it is safe." The plan was executed with military precision. Grey Wolf disappeared into the trees, bow ready, while Red Eagle circled wide to approach the cabin from the rear. Eleanor waited anxiously, scanning the surrounding countryside for any sign of patrols or travelers. 20 tense minutes later, Red Eagle emerged from behind the cabin and waved her forward. Heart-pounding, Eleanor urged her pinto down the slope toward the homestead. As she approached, the cabin door opened, and a man stepped out, tall and lean, with a salt-and-pepper beard and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "Well, well," he drawled as she reined in before him. "Red Eagle tells me you've had quite an adventure, Mrs. Blackwood." Eleanor dismounted carefully, conscious of her injuries. "You know who I am?" "News travels, even out here," Samuel Kensington replied, offering a calloused hand to help her down. "Word came to the fort weeks back about Thomas Blackwood being killed by raiders, his wife presumed dead too." His keen eyes assessed her condition. "Appears those presumptions were premature." "Very," Eleanor agreed dryly. "Mr. Kensington, we don't have much time. There's a cavalry force heading for the Sioux winter camp based on lies told by the same men who killed my husband." Kensington gestured toward the cabin door. "Best come inside. This sounds like a conversation that needs coffee and privacy." The cabin's interior was neat and surprisingly comfortable. Shelves lined with books, a table set with decent china, curtains at the windows. Eleanor was reminded that civilization existed in small pockets throughout this wild country, maintained by individuals who refused to surrender refinement to the frontier's demands. Red Eagle had already taken a seat at the table. Grey Wolf remained outside, keeping watch. As Kensington poured coffee into 3 cups, Eleanor explained the situation. Rawlins's attacks on both settlers and Sioux, her rescue by Red Eagle, their plan to reach Captain Harrison with the truth. When she finished, Kensington let out a low whistle. "Jacob Rawlins, eh? Man's got a reputation. Used to ride with Anderson's irregulars during the war, burned half of Missouri and called it patriotism." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "And now you say he's guiding the cavalry to the Sioux camp to provoke a conflict that will benefit those who want the Sioux removed from the Black Hills," Red Eagle added. "Gold has been found there. Men like Rawlins clear the way for others to take what they want." Kensington nodded grimly. "Been seeing it play out for years, but this time it's different. Government delegations at the fort right now, led by Senator James Thornton himself. They're supposed to be negotiating a new treaty." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Red Eagle, hope kindling. "A senator. He would have the authority to stop the cavalry action if he knew the truth." "Maybe," Kensington allowed, "but reaching him won't be easy. Fort's locked down tight during these negotiations. No one gets in without proper credentials or military escort." "What about Captain Harrison?" Eleanor pressed. "Red Eagle says he's a fair man." "Michael Harrison?" Kensington's eyebrows rose. "He is indeed. Best officer on the frontier by my reckoning. Treats the natives like human beings, which makes him unpopular in certain quarters." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "He's in charge of the delegation's security. Might be your best chance." "Can you get us to him?" Red Eagle asked directly. Kensington studied them both, his shrewd eyes missing nothing. Eleanor's obvious injuries, Red Eagle's proud bearing, the unspoken bond between them that transcended. "They're different worlds. I make a supply run to the fort every week," he said finally. "Was planning to go today, as it happens. I could take Mrs. Blackwood with me, but you," he nodded to Red Eagle, "would have to stay well back. If they saw you anywhere near the fort in the current climate." "I understand," Red Eagle said, though Eleanor could see how the concession pained him. "But I will not be far, and if Mrs. Blackwood can convince Harrison to listen—" "What then?" Kensington challenged. "Rawlins has already poisoned the well. He'll have told everyone she was taken, captive, turned against her own kind. Her words alone may not be enough." Eleanor felt a surge of helplessness. Kensington was right. Her testimony alone might not overcome Rawlins's lies, especially given her association with the Sioux. "The dispatch," she said suddenly, remembering the paper Red Eagle had given her. She withdrew it from inside her jacket, unfolding it carefully. "Red Eagle said this bears Captain Harrison's signature." Kensington examined the document, eyebrows rising. Well now, this is interesting. Military orders from last summer countermanded by Harrison to prevent an attack on a Sioux hunting party. He looked up at Red Eagle. Where did you get this? From a courier who rode carelessly through Lakota territory. Red Eagle replied with the ghost of a smile. The original reached the fort. This was the commander's copy. And you kept it because I wish to understand why one white officer would stop others from attacking my people, Red Eagle said simply. Such men are rare. Kensington handed the paper back to Eleanor. This might get Harrison's attention, but we'll need more to counter whatever tale Rawlins has spun. He turned to Red Eagle. You said there were witnesses to Rawlins attacking your people? Red Eagle nodded. 3 warriors survived to tell what happened, and Eleanor saw the men who attacked her homestead killing her husband. Not enough, Kensington decided. Your warriors can't approach the fort, and one traumatized widow's word against Rawlins and his men. He shook his head. We need something concrete, something that can't be dismissed. Eleanor thought hard, then slowly reached for the small beaded pouch Little Deer had given her. From it, she withdrew Yellow Bear's carved eagle and something else. Thomas's pocket watch, the one possession she had managed to keep through everything. My husband's watch, she explained, opening it to reveal an inscription inside the case. A wedding gift from me, his name, the date. She traced the words with her finger. To Thomas, with eternal love, Eleanor, October 12th, 1870. And this helps us? Kensington asked gently. Rawlins took everything of value from our cabin, Eleanor explained, her voice hardening with certainty, including Thomas's new silver pocket watch, this one, the one he always carried. Her eyes blazed with sudden purpose. If Rawlins or one of his men has it, that proves they were there, that they're the ones who attacked us, not the Sioux. Red Eagle's expression changed as he grasped her meaning. Evidence that cannot be explained away. Kensington gave a low whistle of appreciation. Clever! Very clever, Mrs. Blackwood. But how do we find out if Rawlins has this watch? We can't exactly search for him. We may not need to, Eleanor replied. An idea forming. When soldiers and scouts return to the fort, where do they go first? A slow smile spread across Kensington's weathered face. The saloon. Front Street establishment, to be precise. Only place to get a drink for 20 miles. He nodded approvingly. Rawlins is a drinking man, known for flashing his money and valuables when in his cups. If we could get someone to watch him there, Eleanor suggested, see if he has the watch. Lily, Kensington said decisively, works at the saloon. Smart woman sees everything. If Rawlins has that watch, she'll notice. He stood. Decision made. Right then, Mrs. Blackwood rides with me to the fort. I'll find Lily. Get her looking for that. Watch you, he pointed at Red Eagle. Stay well away until we signal it's safe. Red Eagle clearly disliked the plan, but he nodded reluctantly. How will we know if you succeed? Kensington thought for a moment. There's an abandoned trading post about 2 miles east of the fort. If we find the evidence and convince Harrison, I'll send a rider there with a green kerchief tied to his arm. If things go badly, it'll be red. The next hour was a flurry of activity. Kensington hitched his team to a wagon loaded with supplies for the fort. Eleanor changed into clean clothes. The trader provided a simple dress and shawl that would help her blend in with other settler women. Her buckskin leggings and moccasins remained hidden beneath the dress, a small concession to practicality and a private reminder of those who had saved her. Before departing, she sought out Red Eagle, who was conferring with Grey Wolf near the barn. This plan places all the risk on you, he said when he saw her, disapproval evident in his tone. If Rawlins sees you before you reach Harrison... He won't, Eleanor assured him, more confident than she felt. Kensington knows the fort. He'll get me to Harrison safely. She hesitated, then added, I need you to make me a promise. Red Eagle raised an eyebrow, waiting. If something goes wrong, if the signal is red, don't try to rescue me. She held up a hand to forestall his objection. Your people need you, the children, the elders. They can't lose their war chief on a hopeless mission. And what of justice for Thomas? Red Eagle challenged. For Swift Fox? Will you surrender that so easily? Not surrender, Eleanor corrected. Postpone. There will be other opportunities. To expose Rawlins, other ways to seek justice. She met his gaze steadily. Promise me, Red Eagle, the lives of your people must come first. A complicated emotion flickered across his face. Frustration, admiration, something deeper she couldn't quite name. Finally, he nodded once, sharply. I promise to protect my people. But know this, Eleanor Blackwood. You have become one of those I consider under my protection. The declaration, delivered with such quiet certainty, left Eleanor momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Kensington called from the wagon. Time to move, Mrs. Blackwood. Want to reach the fort by midday. With a final glance at Red Eagle, Eleanor turned and walked to the waiting wagon. As Kensington helped her up to the seat, she looked back once to see Red Eagle watching, his tall figure silhouetted against the winter landscape, proud and unbowed, despite the forces arrayed against his people. The journey to Fort Robinson passed in tense silence, both travelers absorbed in their own thoughts. The fort itself appeared suddenly as they created a rise, a collection of wooden buildings surrounded by a palisade wall, the American flag snapping in the winter wind above the central parade ground. Outside the main walls stood a cluster of additional structures, a sutler's store, stables, and the saloon Kensington had mentioned. As they approached the gates, Eleanor pulled her shawl closer around her face, heart pounding. A sentry stepped forward, rifle at the ready. Halt and identify yourselves. Samuel Kensington, the trader called cheerfully. Weekly supply delivery. And my niece Beth came to visit her sweetheart in E Company. He winked at the guard. Don't tell her pa I brought her. He thinks she's still considering the minister's boy back home. The sentry grinned, glancing at Eleanor without real interest. Good luck to you, miss. Sign here, Mr. Kensington, then proceed to the quartermaster's office. Eleanor kept her head down as they passed through the gate, hardly daring to breathe until they were inside. The fort's interior bustled with activity, soldiers drilling. On the parade ground, officers striding purposefully between buildings, cavalry horses being exercised by stable hands. Government delegation in the headquarters building, Kensington murmured, nodding toward a larger structure, flying both the American flag and what appeared to be a senator's standard. Harrison will be near the senator, but first we need to find Lily and set her up for that watch. He guided the wagon toward the sutler's store, where he began unloading supplies with the help of a young corporal. While the soldier's attention was occupied, Kensington whispered instructions to Eleanor. Wait here. I'll be back in 20 minutes. If anyone asks, you're Beth Kensington, visiting your intended in E Company. Corporal James Miller. Got it? Eleanor nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. Kensington squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before striding off toward the saloon beyond the fort's walls. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Eleanor remained in the wagon, head bowed, trying to appear unremarkable. Soldiers passed, some glancing curiously at the lone woman, but none approached. She was just beginning to hope that Kensington's plan might succeed when a commotion at the main gate drew everyone's attention. A patrol was returning, men and horses looking trail-worn and battle-ready. At their head rode an officer with the insignia of a major, his face set in grim lines. Beside him, looking decidedly pleased with himself, rode Jacob Rawlins. Eleanor shrank back in the wagon, but she was too late. Rawlins's cold eyes swept the fort yard and locked onto her. For a moment he seemed unable to believe what he was seeing, then a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Major Collins," he called, never taking his eyes from Eleanor. "That's her! That's the Blackwood widow I told you about, the one living with the hostiles. All eyes turned toward the wagon. Eleanor froze, trapped, as the Major spurred his horse in her direction, Rawlins close behind. "Arrest that woman," Major Collins ordered. "She's a traitor and spy for the Sioux." "I said arrest that woman," Major Collins repeated, his voice cutting through the sudden silence that had fallen over the fort yard. Two soldiers moved toward Eleanor, rifles at the ready. Her mind raced desperately for some way to escape, to reach Captain Harrison before Rawlins's lies could seal her fate and that of Red Eagle's people. "Hold there!" A commanding voice rang out from the direction of the headquarters building. All heads turned to see a tall officer striding purposefully across the parade ground, captain's bars gleaming on his shoulders. "Captain Harrison," Major Collins acknowledged stiffly. "This is a security matter. The woman is a suspected Sioux collaborator." Harrison continued forward until he stood beside the wagon, his keen eyes taking in Eleanor's condition. "And you know how, Major?" Rawlins urged his horse forward. "I told you, Major. This is the Blackwood widow. We found her cabin empty, assuming she was dead until we spotted her riding with a war party last night." "Indeed." Harrison's tone was measured as he turned to Eleanor. "And what do you say to these accusations, ma'am?" Eleanor straightened, meeting his gaze directly. She recognized the intelligence in those eyes, the careful assessment that looked beyond surface appearances. This was a man who might listen to the truth. "My name is Eleanor Blackwood," she confirmed. "My husband Thomas was murdered by raiders. 3 months ago, the same men who left me for dead in our cabin." She pointed directly at Rawlins. "That man and his gang were the raiders. They've been attacking both settlers and Sioux, trying to provoke conflict." Murmurs ran through the gathered crowd. Rawlins's face darkened with fury. "That's absurd," he spat. "The woman's been corrupted by the savages. They rescued her, filled her head with lies." "If I was rescued by the Sioux," Eleanor interrupted, her voice carrying across the yard, "doesn't that contradict your claim that they're bloodthirsty killers? Why would they save a white woman's life?" The simple logic of her question created a moment of uncertainty, a crack in Rawlins's narrative that Captain Harrison was quick to exploit. "A fair point," he observed. Turning to the Major, he added, "Sir, I believe this matter deserves proper investigation. The woman should be questioned formally, not arrested on the word of a civilian scout." The mention of proper investigation seemed to sway the Major, who prided himself on military procedure. "Very well, take her to the interview room at headquarters, but I want armed guards present." "Of course, sir," Harrison agreed smoothly. As two soldiers helped Eleanor down from the wagon, she caught a glimpse of Samuel Kensington returning from the direction of the saloon. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod. He had found Lily and set their plan in motion. The headquarters building was warm after the winter chill outside. Eleanor was led to a small room containing only a table and several chairs. Captain Harrison dismissed the guards with a curt, "Wait outside. I'll call if needed." Once they were alone, he studied her with open curiosity. "Mrs. Blackwood, you've made quite an entrance. Perhaps now you can tell me what's really happening here." "I have evidence," Eleanor said without preamble, withdrawing. "Red Eagle's dispatch from inside her dress. You wrote this order last summer, preventing an attack on a Sioux hunting party." Harrison examined the paper, surprise registering on his face. "Where did you get this?" "From Red Eagle, war chief of the Hunkpapa band." "Red Eagle," Harrison repeated, recognition in his voice. "A formidable man, not one given to rash actions or lies." He set the paper down carefully. "Continue." Eleanor told her story from the beginning, the attack on her homestead, Thomas's murder, her rescue by Red Eagle, and the discovery that Rawlins's gang was targeting both settlers and Sioux to inflame tensions. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grim. "It fits a pattern," he acknowledged when she finished. "There have been incidents along the frontier that never made sense. attacks attributed to Sioux that didn't match their usual methods. Rawlins has been guiding the cavalry patrols, Eleanor pressed, using his position to direct soldiers away from his gang's activities while leading them straight to Sioux encampments. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. A clever strategy. Create enough chaos, and no one looks too closely at inconsistencies. He leaned forward. But accusations require proof, Mrs. Blackwood. Your word against Rawlins won't be enough. I know, Eleanor agreed. That's why we need to find my husband's pocket watch, silver, with his name and our wedding date inscribed inside. Rawlins took it during the raid. If he still has it... A knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison opened it to find Samuel Kensington standing there with a young woman in a saloon dress. Captain, Kensington nodded. This is Lily from the Front Street establishment. She has information relevant to your investigation. Harrison ushered them in, closing the door firmly behind them. Lily, a striking woman with shrewd eyes that missed nothing, went straight to the point. Rawlins been flashing a silver pocket. Watch at the saloon for weeks, she reported, claiming he took it off a dead Indian, opens it to check the time, makes sure everyone sees it. Can you describe it? Harrison asked. Silver, with an engraving inside, Lily confirmed. I served him enough whiskey last week to get a good look. Had a man's name, Thomas something, and a date. Eleanor's heart pounded with vindication. That's it. That's Thomas's watch. Harrison's expression hardened with decision. Kensington, bring Senator Thornton here immediately. Tell him it concerns the security of the treaty negotiations. He turned to Lily. Can you get that watch? The saloon girl smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. Rawlins keeps it in his left vest pocket. He's in the saloon now, celebrating with his men. 3 more drinks, and he won't notice a thing. Events moved swiftly after that. Within an hour, Senator Thornton, a distinguished man with iron-grey hair and penetrating eyes, sat at the table examining Thomas's pocket watch, retrieved by Lily's nimble fingers. The inscription inside matched exactly what Eleanor had described. This is damning evidence, the senator acknowledged. Combined with Mrs. Blackwood's testimony and these irregularities, Captain Harrison has documented. He shook his head in disgust. A deliberate attempt to sabotage peace negotiations by provoking conflict. The cavalry patrol Rawlins is guiding is heading for the Sioux winter camp as we speak, Eleanor reminded them urgently. Innocent people, women, children, will die if they're not stopped. Senator Thornton stood, authority radiating from his bearing. Captain Harrison, arrest Jacob Rawlins and his associates immediately, then dispatch riders to recall that patrol. I want those orders countersigned by me personally. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Rawlins and his remaining men were taken into custody, their protests silenced by the evidence mounting against them. Riders galloped from the fort, bearing orders that would prevent a massacre. And Eleanor, exhausted but vindicated, waited anxiously for word that the signal had been sent to Red Eagle, green for success. As twilight approached, Samuel Kensington found her on the headquarters porch, watching the eastern horizon. It's done, he told her quietly. My boy rode out an hour ago, green kerchief tied to his arm plain as day. He smiled at her evident relief. You did it, Mrs. Blackwood. Saved a lot of lives today. We all did, Eleanor corrected, including him in the victory. The door opened behind them, and Captain Harrison emerged with Senator Thornton. Mrs. Blackwood, the senator addressed her formally, I wanted to thank you personally for your courage in bringing this matter to light. The treaty negotiations can now proceed without the shadow of manufactured violence hanging over them. What about the Red Eagle's people? Eleanor asked. Will they be safe? I've dispatched an official invitation for their leaders to join the negotiations, the senator assured her. With proper representatives at the table, perhaps we can find a solution that respects the concerns of all parties. Eleanor knew the road ahead would not be easy. Too much blood had been spilled, too many promises broken for simple solutions. But it was a start, a chance for voices like Red Eagle's to be heard by those with the power to make genuine change. "And what of you?" Harrison asked gently. "Your homestead was destroyed, your husband murdered. Where will you go now?" It was a question Eleanor hadn't allowed herself to consider, focused as she had been on immediate survival and then on justice. But now, standing on the threshold of an uncertain future, she found her answer came with surprising clarity. "There's a Sioux winter camp where a woman named Singing Bird treated my wounds, where a child called Little Deer gave me a good luck charm, where an elder named Yellow Bear told me I had the heart of an eagle." She smiled, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders. "I'd like to go back, at least long enough to thank them properly. After that, we'll see." 3 days later, as the first representatives from the Sioux bands began arriving at Fort Robinson for the treaty talks, Eleanor stood at the eastern gate. Red Eagle waited just beyond the fort's perimeter, mounted on his painted horse. Behind him, Grey Wolf and 2 other warriors sat tall and proud, honored delegates to a negotiation that might yet change the course of their people's future. As Eleanor walked toward them, she felt the curious stares of soldiers and settlers. Alike, let them stare, she thought. Let them see that bridges could be built between worlds that had too long been divided by fear and misunderstanding. Red Eagle extended his hand as she approached, helping her mount behind him as they had traveled. "So many miles before. Your plan succeeded," he acknowledged, respect evident in his tone. "Rawlins will face justice. The cavalry has withdrawn from our territory. For now," Eleanor cautioned, knowing how fragile such victories could be. "For now is enough." Red Eagle replied with unexpected optimism. "Each day of peace is a victory worth celebrating." As they rode together toward the sunrise, Eleanor Blackwood reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. From a desperate widow left for dead to an instrumental figure in a peace that might just hold. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time since Thomas's death, she looked toward it with hope rather than dread. And somewhere, perhaps, Thomas was smiling his approval. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.